Everybody wants to know if they have enough money to retire. And honestly, as far as finances go and going into the retirement years, it can be probably one of the most stressful things that we have seen clients go through. So I want to talk about this and really just break it down for you. I mean, do you have enough money to retire? Well, let's talk through how to find exactly how much you actually need in retirement years, how much money you're going to need each month to get by, how to get more out of the money even if you don't think you have enough. Oh gosh, that's one that we go through so many times with clients and they don't feel they have enough. And what I have found is some people really budget to the point where it's to the extreme of they say, well, I'm not going to have enough money, but we actually break things down and look at it. And they're just trying to spend way too much money, even more than they're living on today. And then you've got the other side of it where you have people that are actually maybe just haven't been able to save as much as they want. And we do have to figure that out and say, okay, how can we make this money last longer? So we'll talk about that. And then I'm going to show you a real life scenario of how this can work so that you can possibly have some takeaways for yourself. Maybe it's not your specific scenario, but it's something that you can think through to figure out and say, okay, hey, this is what I can apply to my retirement when I'm going into the retirement years. And so as far as how much exactly do you need? Well, let's talk through this a bit. And so sure, there's the basic budgeting of everything, but it's accounting for all of your expenses. There's many ways to do it. Yeah, you can just budget every single dollar. If you're watching Dave Ramsey, that's something that he talks through, knowing where every single dollar goes. I will tell you, I personally don't do that because it will drive you completely bananas. Though we've got some clients who do it. They have an Excel spreadsheet. They have different things they're tracking, and they know every single penny to the T. Calculating all annual expenses and dividing that by 12 to get monthly expenses. And so if you go through and you say, all right, well, last year, we had our credit card and we had our bank statements, and we had everything. And we say, all right, we spent, a total altogether of, let's just say $50,000, divide that by 12. And then you will have your average monthly expense. Now, you do have to be careful doing that strategy because what's going to happen is you're going to have those monthly expenses that are much higher in certain months that you really have to account for. That's things that will come due, such as maybe you're paying your insurance annually or semi-annually or your property tax bill. Things will come out of the blue that you're paying higher in certain months than in other months. So just make sure you're thinking through that. Another way to really start to factor this in is looking at bank statements, credit card statements, any other tracking, and view each month over a 1 to 2 year period to find your monthly expense. This will help to actually really solidify the breakdown of your monthly expenses, how I just mentioned it, because if you're looking at the actual monthly expense, then you will know, okay, well, in January, we may need $5,000 a month, in February and March, but oh wait, in December, our property tax is due, and that's a much higher month. And also we have gifts for Christmas and all these other things that we haven't budgeted in. So then okay, well, I'm going to need to make sure that every single month, if I pull $6,000 from my retirement account and I pay taxes and I have $5,000 extra, well, if that's the case, maybe a little bit of that needs to be skimmed off the top to save for December months. You've got to find what works for you. There's so many different methods, and I'm never just going to give you one exact scenario and say, this is how you should do it, because I know that I'm different than you. And your scenario is going to be completely different. And the way you're going to think through it and what works for you is going to be different than maybe what works for me. So that's why I want to give you some ideas on thinking through that though. Now, also coming into this, we want to think through the additional costs in retirement because sure, you're going to have your base expenses, but there's going to be things that are going to come up that you aren't thinking about. Examples could be healthcare, which is a massive one for retirement years that you have to build into your plan. Auto repairs, new vehicles, travel, relocating, a new roof. Here in Florida, one that's really important, a new air conditioning unit. So those are things that may not come up every single day, but you know what? If you had a roof repaired or a whole new roof and your roof is now 15 years old and you've got 30 years to live through retirement, you're probably going to have to replace that roof at some point. So that's something to think through. Also, really, when you're thinking through your expenses, also look at maybe some expenses that could go away once you have retired. Something that a lot of people mess up and they actually try to account for is that, okay, I make $100,000 a year. My bring home pay is $60,000. And they're looking at the fact that they're saving to their Roth $8,000 a year. Well, now they only have $52,000 to work off of. Well, in the retirement years, hopefully you won't have to save anymore. So that does free up a little bit of extra money right there that you maybe weren't accounting for. So that's a big one to think through. Now, also, something that we see is really people that want to be just too conservative. Now, if you have enough money and you can afford to be too conservative with your plan and you aren't worried about anything, go for it. But if that's not your case and you really need to have some market growth to keep up with inflation and also potentially just grow the dough for the long term, then you've got to factor in what your plan is going to need for you. Considering buckets of money or even a portfolio like a 60-40, a 70-30, 70% stocks, 30% bonds, different variations there where you could say, all right, well, when there's the down years in the market, I have other assets to pull from that aren't going to be down near as much, or at least hopefully that's the case. So really factoring that into your plan is going to be helpful for you to control your emotion when it comes to when there is a 20% pullback in the market. If you have $1 million, well, now you only have 800,000. But if you look and you say, well, you know what, I've only got 800,000, but this bucket over here is only down 2% versus the average market down of 20%. I'll pull from that bucket for a little while. And so really trying to think through that, coming up with the strategy that's going to work for you as well there to make this money last. And then another one is finding the optimal Social Security approach for you. And I say for you because ultimately it may show that you should delay Social Security until 70 because you can get the highest guaranteed payout from the US government on Social Security. But maybe it shows that, you know what? We don't want you to spend down all of your assets in the early years. We want you to take Social Security first and then have the ability to let those assets grow a lot longer for the lifetime of the plan. That will also factor in you'll have to factor in part of your inheritance goals. Do you need money at the end of life? Is there something you want to leave for your kids? Or you're like, hey, I want my last check to bounce. That's going to really determine some of that planning as well to make sure that you're factoring in how much money you need through the retirement years and how to, when to take Social Security and when to delay it. Another one's getting more out of your money, considering the slowdown in life. A lot of people don't think through this and they don't really realize that, hey, today you might need $5,000 a month, but when you're 85 years old, you may not need that much. And now I know you're going to say, well, what about inflation? It's going to be way more expensive. And I get that. But I'm talking about with inflation factored in, if you're just looking at general dollars, you're probably not going to spend as much in your late years as you are in your early years. Because in your early years, we talk about, it's travel and all these things you want to do. We call it the go-go years. So you're going to have your go-go years that you can build in to do a little bit of extra things. Then maybe, in your mid 70s, maybe you have the slow go years where you're still going, but ultimately your body physically, you're just not able to go as much and you're starting to slow down. And then maybe in your 80s, then you can actually go to the no-go years. Now, everybody again is going to be different on this, and your health may already be in a position where you could say, you know what, I'm already going to be slowing down. Or maybe you're saying, hey, my health is so good, I'm going to have go-go years until my 80s. And then slow go years in the 80s and hopefully live till 100 plus. And those are my no-go years. So really thinking through that will help to actually align your plan to know the exact amount of expenses you're going to need through retirement. Now, be careful though with this one, because when it comes to spending all of your dough down till the end of life, you will have the idea that you possibly need some sort of assisted living care, nursing home care. And now, if you've got some assets, every state works a little bit different, whether it be Medi-Cal or Medicare or Medicaid, not Medicare, but you've got all these different factors that come into play. But if you spend down your assets, eventually there is the idea of government assistance coming in. But if you have the idea that you want to leave an inheritance or something for somebody else or donate to a charity at the end of life, then you might want to really factor that into play, because that is one that could catch you off guard. Now let's take a look at the real life scenario. As I had mentioned, we've got retired Roger. And so this may not be your specific scenario, but it at least will give you some takeaways. So we're looking at retired Roger. He's 65 years old, planning horizon till hopefully the rightful age of 90 years old for Roger. As far as his expenses and savings, we don't have anything going on there because he is retired, but he will have income. The only income Roger's going to have, $2,500 based on his full retirement age, though, as you see here, he's going to be taking Social Security at age 70. And so from there, we talk about the goals. This is where we want to really start to look at things as I had presented to you before. And so his retirement age is 65, his retirement expense, $3,000. And you're probably like, $3,000 is all? Well, let's really break this down and look at all of the other expenses in the plan. And so he's got $3,000 as his baseline. That's his baseline just to get by, to make sure that all of the general bills get paid and he's got food on the table. Then we've got the annual healthcare retirement cost. Now, this is one that will catch you off guard a little bit if you're not careful. So you have to make sure you know what your costs are going to be in healthcare going into the retirement years. Then you've got your go-go years. From 65 to 75, Roger's going to spend $15,000 a year doing a little bit of traveling and enjoying himself. Then his slow go years, he's going to slow down between 76 and 79. He's only going to spend $8,000 extra per year. He's going to have a car that he's going to buy every 10 years in the plan. He's going to pay cash $35,000. He's going to have a roof replacement of $18,000 eventually, and he's going to have an AC replacement. Now you're probably looking and saying, well, what happens here? Because inflation's really going to eat this up. But it's actually built into the plan that we have inflation that we're factoring in to really look at what the future dollars will actually be. And now Roger's done well for himself. He has a net worth over $1 million. He's got $850,000 that is all pre-retirement dollars that's not been taxed yet that he's going to have to pay. And as far as his allocation goes, just to give you an idea, he's invested for growth, 70% stocks, 30% bonds, for the breakdown of kind of what I had talked about before of really trying to figure out, okay, let's get some growth here. But if the market does pull back, generally speaking, bonds don't get hit near as bad. And he has some other liquidity there that he can pull from. Now he has his property. He's got his asset there with the $300,000 home. The property tax and insurance is an additional expense also that is factoring into the plan in a separate area. So that $3,000 is not really what Roger's actually spending. Now, if we take a look at the plan itself, Roger's on track. He's doing great because you're like, well, 100% probability of success is what I'd like to see here. But you're not going to get 100% on what's called the Monte Carlo, which is what this image is showing you. It's running 1,000 scenarios and really trying to figure out in a sense, the world's best market, the world's worst market, and finding a good median line of what could happen here. And so for Roger, he's got a 91% probability of success, $596,000 remaining at the end of life, which would be great for the sake of inheritance purposes if he has that goal. But if we're looking over here on the left, it's a lot less. Well, why is that? Well, just what I had talked about. What if you took full retirement age Social Security instead of age 70? Now, this is a case-by-case basis, but that has an impact on the plan, as well as Roger's going down to a balanced portfolio, only 50% stocks, 50% bonds, reduces the growth that he needs to make sure that he has enough assets to make him all the way through the retirement years. So this is one scenario. It could really be different for you specifically, but this is all things that you should be thinking about to really make sure that you have enough money to retire. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about Jazz Wealth and how we can help as fiduciary advisors, go to jazzwealth.com. If you want more educational content, be sure to check out our videos here.